This is my 2006 Harley Sportster. The other night I was riding it home and the low oil pressure light came on. So I got home, checked the oil. It was a little bit low, but not empty by any means. I topped it off. The light stayed on. Next day I gave it a complete oil change, new filter. The light stayed on. And then I went and got a new oil pressure sensor and replaced that, and the light stayed on. And so that means that the problem was a little bit more serious. It was something inside. I looked online and found a guy on YouTube. His username was Fred Corcoran, that showed a stripped gear coming off the crankshaft that's supposed to interface with the oil pump. And I also found some guys talking about Sportsters and Buells having the same problem between 20,000 and 30,000 miles. My bike's at 36,000 miles right now. Basically, the gear on that shaft is crap, and it gets stripped and flies to pieces. And then your oil pump won't turn, which won't circulate your oil, which means no oil pressure. So I'm about to get into this thing and see if that's the case. I think it is, because there was a couple occasions, not very often, but occasionally, where I would hear like a bad grinding sound when I would start it up, and it would stop right after the bike got started. But I'm guessing that was probably that gear spinning. So first thing I got to do is get this exhaust off so that I can check my valves, make sure that everything's evened out, and then take the rockers off to relieve the pressure on the push rods, which will relieve the pressure on the cams, which will allow me to take the cams off so that I can get to that shaft and get that oil pump drive gear off. So we'll get started on that. Alright, just to be able to see the valves from the outside, you're going to have to look at them through the air intake and through the exhaust. To get the air intake manifold off, you got to take the air cleaner off first, then you got to take the carburetor off. You can let the carburetor sit on top of something and leave it attached to the throttle cables, but to have enough slack in the throttle cables to be able to do that, you have to take the gas tank off and also pull the wires from the spark plugs and feed them through to the right side of the motor, and then you can let it hang over here. The worst part of this, at least for me in the past, is getting this one screw off of the air intake manifold. It's extremely difficult. I start off with a Allen wrench that's been cut off so that it goes in just after the elbow and the Allen wrench, just after the curve, to get it to fit in here. I've had these get so tight in here that I ended up having to weld an Allen wrench into it just to break it loose. They're a real nightmare if they get too tight, so hopefully I won't have that problem. This is my modified Allen wrench. It's a 1/4 Allen wrench. You can probably still see some of the old weld bead on there from the last time I took off one of those intake manifolds. Hopefully this works. Okay, so I got the rockers off, took the push rods out that relieve the pressure on the cams, took off the bottom foot peg and rear brake so it wouldn't get in the way. If you look in here, you can see that factory oil pump drive gear is just sheared. The teeth on it are all tore up. And then you look down right here, you can see some really big chunks of metal. My only hope is that because the oil wasn't circulating, this stuff wasn't able to get passed around the rest of the engine. I haven't noticed when I took the filter off anything that looked like that in there. So hopefully it's all contained down here. I'm going to take out the oil pump and go through it and make sure that there's no more fragments of this crap in there jamming it up. To me, this is just totally unacceptable. Poor materials. Harley Davidson only gives you a 5,000 mile warranty because they know that nothing's going to happen in 5,000 miles. But this bike only has about 36,000 on it. I would just expect that the internal components that haven't been touched by anybody wouldn't just fly to pieces like this. So here it is with the cams taken out, and it's kind of hard to get the lighting right so you can see it, but that gear is just falling apart. It's just Alright, so my buddy Fred suggested that I take the oil pump out and make sure that there were no metal shavings inside there. He said that it should just turn freely by hand without any kind of binding or anything like that. So I checked it, and it wasn't turning freely. There was something jamming it up. The manual says that it's just simple. You can take out the two screws that fasten the oil pump to the case and just remove the hoses. No big deal, it drops right out. I didn't find that to be the case. The unit would not clear the bottom frame without removing the bottom of the pump. So I had to essentially partially disassemble the pump itself in order to get the top of the pump to fit through this hole and drop out the bottom. And the hoses, of course, would not come off easily. I ended up having to just cut them and then work on getting the rubber ends and the clamps and stuff off of the pump once I had it free. So now I'm going to have to buy new oil lines to replace those, because now they're going to be too short. Alright, so I got the cam gears placed back inside the cam case using the diagram that's inside the Sportster service manual, and also a video that I saw on YouTube just to double check. Takes a little bit of messing around with to make sure all the dots and lines line up, but it's not overly complex. The thing that's more difficult than that is holding the gasket in place on the case and then lining up this cover so that the outer bushings go onto the end of the cam gears in a nice straight line and come straight into the case without dropping the gasket. And then the other tricky part is getting all these screws in the right places. The screws are all different sizes, so the best way to, if you've taken them out and you didn't pay attention to how long they were, what you need to do is, before you try to put the cover back on the case, you need to put the screws through the holes and then look at them from the inside and make sure that you all have about the same amount of threads sticking out from each hole. You don't want one that's barely coming through and then one that's pushed way through. You want to get them all equal, and then once you figure out which screws go to which holes, then put them on a piece of cardboard or something like that with a diagram so that they're marked, so that you can get them in there and they'll all thread in to the same depth. That was the most difficult part of getting the stupid cover back on the case. And then once you do that, I went ahead and reassembled everything, put my push rods back in, and put my rockers on with new gaskets. And I'm just about to put the intake manifold on and air cleaner, and then we'll finish putting everything on there with the gas tank and everything, and fill it full of new oil, new filter, and give it a try. So one of the tips that I read online said that after you take that gear case off and drain all the oil out of the bike, what you should do when you put it back together is take the spark plugs out and let the starter motor crank it over a few times just to get the oil circulating again, and then also to feel the air coming out of the spark plug holes to make sure that you're getting movement out of your pistons. And so I did that, gave that a shot, felt good, felt the air coming out of the holes, and put the spark plugs in, was all excited, got ready to start it, and then it wouldn't start. And just, you know, after going through a job like that, I got pretty upset and thought that I'd messed something up pretty bad, and tried to start it, made sure that the charge on the battery was good, still couldn't get it to start. Went inside, sat down for a little bit, and then I thought about it for a minute, and if you take the spark plugs out, there's nothing to ignite the fuel that's being pumped into the cylinders, which basically just flooded the engine. So I went back out, I took the spark plugs back out, I let it sit for a while, let it air out, came back out and put the spark plugs back in, and